Ordinary bitter might have the least appealing name in all of the BJCP guidelines, but it's neither particularly bitter or, at least in my view, all that ordinary. The Brits have been brewing this style for hundreds of years, but what happens if we took a bunch of shortcuts? That's what Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell did, brewing his ordinary bitter short and shoddy style. What did participants think of the finished beer? Let's find out. This episode is sponsored by Great Fermentations. More on them in a bit. Now, Will, I'm really pleased you took this style and gave it the short and shoddy treatment, because I think British bitters are really good brewed quickly. In fact, I brewed an entire batch of beer in 60 minutes. So here we go. I have got a iPad here with a timer to keep me honest. What was your inspiration for picking an ordinary bitter?
So it was a couple of decades ago, and I went on a work trip to London, and I was introduced to the very passionate real ale movement that people are trying to keep alive over in the UK. And I got to drink several cask ales, and while they don't usually call them ordinary bitters or best bitters, they just call it a bitter. I'm sure that I had some ordinary bitter in there somewhere, and I just fell in love with some of those English styles for just their simplicity and their deliciousness and their crushability. And so I just really wanted to see if I could kind of recreate, maybe not the whole cask element of it. I don't know how short and shoddy that particularly is, but I just wanted to recreate some of that, nostalgia of going back over across the pond and having a couple of pints in the local public down the street.
Yeah, so before we talk about the beer, that is a very fetching hoodie you've got there, Will.
Oh my. Well, thank you for noticing. See, this is my kind of science right here. But I also noticed that you kind of are a fan of the Hop Chronicles over there. So maybe.
Well, yes, I am, and also Brülosophy. Yeah, we have the Brülosophy merch. We're super stoked that it is out. There's been lots of requests for it, so you can also look as fashionable as us, these fashion models, Will and I. Just check out the merch store on
You too can look
brulosophy.com.
like a homeless bearded man in a hoodie.
Okay, we picked the style of ordinary bitter. What actually is that style? Well, the BJCP describe it as low gravity, low alcohol, and low carbonation beer, making this an easy drinking session beer, and the malt profile can vary in flavor and intensity, but should never override the overall bitter impression. Drinkability is a critical component of this style. It is basically a very sessionable beer. It is very low alcohol, but it is pretty full in flavor, at least if it's done right. So, Will, let's start with the recipe. How did you come up with the recipe for this? What's in this beer?
Well, not to tell trade secrets, but I originally wanted to do a best bitter, but somebody at Brülosophy had already started working on one. They may or may
Hmm.
not be in this particular video. I can't disclose such information, but you can go to the website and probably look up who did that one and how abysmally it turned out, I'm sure. But but no. So I just knowing that information, I had a best bitter recipe, and I'm like, well, you know what? Ordinary bitter, not a big deal. We'll just kind of turn the volume down a little bit, and I'll go from very sessionable ale to a extremely sessionable ale. And because the one of the best things about ordinary bitter is you're shooting for that 3.5% ish kind of sweet spot there, and you can just sit back and drink that nutty estery goodness all day. So we just kind of went in there, and most of my malt bill was 84, almost 84% Maris Otter, which is a solid choice if you're going to do something like this. Sometimes with different beers, I'll split Maris Otter and pale malt, but since this is just such a kind of a low ABV, low gravity style, I kind of wanted to do as much Maris Otter as I could get in there for all that nutty, flavorful goodness. I did about just under 5% Caramel 80, just under 5% Caraviena, just under 5% Crystal 60, and then just a smattering of pale chocolate, because pale chocolate is an English malt typically. Chris makes a really good one, and just get that little smattering of just a little extra in there for that. And then for hops, I wanted to go obviously English hops, and so I kind of went a little new school and old school. So I had some Target in there for my 30-minute edition because it's a little higher alpha acidity. And then, of course, towards the end, the last 2 minutes of the boil, I wanted to do some fuggle just to get that old school English character, because I do love nice fuggle in a really nice English beer. So, and then, of course, the yeast of choice was Imperial Yeast A09 Pub, because that is one of my favorite yeast strains out there. And really, just the recipe itself it's just a beautiful love letter to English styles, sans the time it takes to actually brew one.
I absolutely love the recipe you came up with here. I mean, obviously, Team Marisata, that is absolutely the way to go. But I do also always add pale chocolate malt, just a little touch into my bitters. I think that is kind of the secret sauce of a really good British bitter. So I'm delighted that you did the same. Now, short and shoddy, that is where we basically try to brew the beer almost as fast as possible and not be too worried about measuring stuff out properly or maybe skipping a few steps. So take me through your brew day.
So I started about 3:06 p.m. I added a full volume of RO water, and then I did measure my water salts for this one. I've had kind of mediocre luck when I didn't do the water salts. Those have been my least satisfied short and shoddy. So I still measure water salts, even though I know
You took the
Marshall.
full 30 seconds to actually measure your
Yeah,
water
yeah.
salts.
Instead of doing a little pinch of something, a little smattering of that, I actually measured it because, again, I've always been more disappointed in the ones that I didn't measure, and maybe that's anecdotal, but it's in my head. So I did that, and as the water was heating up, I weighed out and milled the grain, and then when the water was heated to the appropriate temperature, I went ahead and stirred in my grist, and I had my Delta Brewing all-in-one system set to about 154 degrees Fahrenheit for my mash temp. So I mashed it for a grand total of a whopping 30 minutes, uh, and then after that, pulled the basket out, let it drain. This was a one of those nice, lovely, no sparge mash days for me. Um, and then during the mash rest, I prepared my kettle hop additions. And as I said, I used a Target for bittering at 30 minutes. Again, it's got that 10% alpha acidity. It's a nice English hop, so I figured I would stay with the English theming. And then I also used Fuggle there in the last couple of minutes of the boil. Um, just again, that Fuggle is again that some of that quintessential UK kind of earthy goodness that happens with those beers. Um, and so we did the 30-minute boil, and then after that was done, I chilled it down quickly with jaded immersion chiller, and then took a refractometer reading with my digital refractometer, and I got 10.3 bricks, which comes out to 1041 OG, which is perfectly fine.
That was a 60% brew house efficiency for such a short mash, 30-minute mash. That's pretty good, I would say.
It's not terrible. Again, it's very low gravity, so you're not compacting your grain bed quite as much. The only ones I get better efficiency on are the ones where I'm adding a lot of sugar.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
So I mean, you could have mashed for an hour and maybe instead of 60%, you get 65% or 70%, but we're talking about a pretty low gravity beer to start with here. So, you've just saved yourself potentially 30 minutes here.
I mean, 30. I've saved 30 minutes on the boil. I've saved 30 minutes on the mash. I've saved myself an hour of life here, Martin. We can go do things like drink more ordinary bitter with the amount of time that we've saved. Um, so what's really cool though is like after I cooled it down and got it over into my Delta Firm tank, and by the time I pitched my yeast, it was 5:42 p.m. So my entire brew day, even on my 110 volt all-in-one systems, was like what 2.5 hours, 2 hours and 36 minutes.
We ask a series of tasters to actually try this beer out and get their opinions on it. And before we share that, just a quick word on today's sponsor, and that is Great Fermentations. Family owned and operated for more than 25 years, Great Fermentations offers a huge range of brewing supplies and equipment. Great Fermentations are well known for their top-notch customer service, which I can fully attest to. And Great Fermentations offer the ability to custom build your malt bills in fractional amounts, so you're not forced to order full pound increments when you only need a half or quarter pound of something. And shipping is free on most orders over $59. Check them out at greatfermentations.com. Now, Will, before you presented these beers to tasters, obviously you poured a little sample yourself. We've got a picture here of what that looks like. What were your impressions of this beer?
So if you look at the picture, it has a great kind of golden color, which is lovely, but it wasn't quite as clear as you would really want. I did let it sit in the kind of cold conditioning for a couple of weeks, so I would have expected that AO9 pub to have flocked out a little bit more than what it did. But overall, it may not have looked the part perfectly, but it did taste the part. So it just had a nice, little light toast and caramel flavors to it, with kind of a little bit of moderate bitterness with some earthy hop notes to it. So I really, Really enjoyed the beer. I thought it was quite delicious.
Now, you presented this beer to 20 participants, and they are given a survey where we tell them what the beer style is and a little BJCP description in case they're not familiar with it. And then we ask them a series of questions about it. Now, the first question was asking as to how hoppy, malty, and dry they perceived the beer. Will, what do you make of these results?
Yeah, so they get asked on a 0 to 5 scale, where rating of 0 would indicate they didn't taste anything at all, and 5 would indicate extremely. And so nothing went too far out of bounds. So it just a little over 2 on the hoppy, around 2.5 on malty, and then just shy of 3 out of 5 for the dry attenuated. And so I thought that was pretty fair. Again, it was kind of it's a really low ABV, just highly sessionable ordinary bitter. So you're not really going to blow any of those things off the charts with that particular beer style.
Now, the next question comes down to hops. What were the most prominent hop characteristics? And it's a clear winner here for fruity.
I always find that to be interesting, but I do know like Target especially has kind of a citrus character to it, that actually exists. I would have probably expected a little bit more earthy to go up there because of the late addition of the Fuggle, but fruity got the highest, with 7 people marking it. 4 people put pine resinous, and then finally we got to 3 of the people putting earthy, and then also melon. So didn't quite go off the chart. I didn't expect fruity to go quite off the chart, but I do think even though we associate a lot of these hops with certain characteristics, I almost get citrus. Like even like Sots, I get citrus character from. So I'm not that surprised by it.
Now, the malt characteristics, this is a malt forward beer. So I think this is the thing that I would be most interested to see what the results were. And I think this is pretty in line with what we would expect.
Yeah, this is like again, you just say nailed it because you're like, okay, the highest one was nutty. Thank you, Maris Otter. Nailed it. Second highest, cracker and bread crust. Thank you, Maris Otter. Nailed it. And then we go down to toasty, and then a few people put chocolate, and then at the very bottom had caramel sweetened roast, which I don't know where the roast person came from, but hey, if you're gonna put all the things there, you might as well be perfect.
Yeah, it's basically like you can see the ingredient percentages, and then they're kind of represented in the malt characteristic percentages as well, but even down to the chocolate because you added a little bit of pale chocolate malt in.
It is pretty bizarre, but the yeast characteristics again, uh, what you would expect with an English ale strain is a nice estery yeast profile, and again, 10 of the respondents put esters as being the most dominant yeast characteristic. So again, nailed it. We had a few people put phenolic, 4 people, 3 people put clean. Okay, and then of course we get a couple of random wild and sulfur in there. But again, if you're going to put it on the survey, somebody's probably going to pick it at some point, so you might as well be perfect.
The last two questions are basically asking to rate the beer overall rather than any kind of specific characteristic. And the first question just asks how representative of the actual beer style is this? So, how much is this really a good representation of an ordinary bitter? And you did pretty well.
Again, so we did get one person that hit 0, not at all. So I imagine they picked the wild, one of the wild check boxes of people. I can't imagine the 2 people that picked wild and they didn't put not at all. I can't quite reconcile that in my head, but hey, that's how surveys go sometimes. But yeah, the majority of people, 12 of the tasters, 12 out of the 20, put it at a 4 out of 5. And then we had 3 tasters put it at a 3 out of 5, another 3 tasters put it at a 2 out of 5, and then we had 2 tasters that put it at a 5 out of 5, and then of course my one taster at a 0 out of 5. So, but overall, most people put it at a 4. So I think a 3 to 4 is fair. Maybe not the perfect ordinary bitter, but it was a nice beer to drink and a pretty good ordinary bitter.
And then the final question really says, how much did you enjoy the beer? Which is really more of a question about do you enjoy the style or not? Because we've seen that this is actually, to most people's palates, a pretty representative example of an ordinary bitter. So, with that in mind, what do people rate the beer in terms of enjoyment?
We had 5 people give it a 5 out of 5, which is pretty good, but 9 people, which is the highest one, gave it a 4 out of 5, which is, to say that we have a total of 9 plus 5, what is that, 14? So we have 14 people that just really enjoyed this beer. 3 out of 5, 5 people gave it that rating, and then only 2 people gave it a 2 out of 5 rating. So nobody gave it a 1 or a 0. So pretty much this was overall a very enjoyable beer according to the people that took the survey. So I would agree. I thought it was a very good, enjoyable beer myself. So
Yep. I hope the takeaway from this is that people enjoy ordinary bitter despite this extremely dull, boring sounding name. This is actually a super enjoyable style, and people who tried it, they thought that your beer was representative of that style and that it was pretty good. I mean, I don't think you can do better than that.
no, and again, you shaved an hour off your day. You've got a 3.8% crusher in your kegerator that you can just sit there and go back, and you can literally drink it all afternoon while you're watching some good old Premier League soccer on the telly, and you just do all that, from this side of the pond even. So it was very quite the enjoyable beer. I would do something pretty close to that if I had to brew it all over again. So
Well, jolly good, old chap. You really did a fantastic job with this one. Of course, we've alluded to a few times the fact that I really messed up my British beer. And if you'd like to see how, why, what happened, watch this video here.